Warning: the following contains explicit language and subject matter that may not be suitable for younger listeners, church folk, and people who enjoy kale smoothies.
So I appreciate a good culture. I appreciate a good accent. You got the right accent, you can get away with a lot of shit. You be in a club and say something foul to a woman in an American accent, she might slap the shit out of you. Like, excuse me, baby, I don't mean to bother you, but you got a fat ass. I'd love to take you home, fuck the shit out you. Motherfucker. Psh. English accent, that just roll off the tongue different. Excuse me, I don't mean to bother you, but I'd really love to take you back to my hotel and fuck you doggy stuff a little bit, you know what I mean? Motherfucker, where you from? That shit is... Oh my God. Say something else. Ladies, y'all laughing. Some of the fellas might try that on the way home. Did you have a good time at the comedy show tonight? Did you really? The next light, because you give me a little bit of head, just a little bit. I don't want much, just want you to polish me knob, you know what I mean? I ain't even gonna lie, I'll use that shit to get some pussy. I'll walk up to a woman and say anything. Excuse me, you know what time it is? Oh my God, the accent is beautiful. Where are you from? I just make shit up. McDonald's, England, have you ever heard of it? I live right off of Egg McMuffin Lane, have you ever heard of it? Oh my God, girl, you live off of Egg McMuffin, let's go.
Yeah, all right, so we're recording now. So, welcome back to A Pod Amongst Men, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Steve B. This is Coffee Break Conversations for the 21st Century. And I'm here with a special guest today from across the pond in the UK, Mr. Eldridge Cook. Say hello to the guest, please.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Yeah. I'll overdo the English. Hello, everybody. Eldridge Cook here.
So, I have you on the show today. You're a men's coach. You call yourself a mindset coach, a life coach. What was the title you would prefer?
It's a funny one. I kind of go on a bog standard confidence kind of coach. But really, I think what really I like to do is kind of hold people accountable.
Okay.
Sometimes when we use these titles, we're kind of maybe saying that somebody isn't confident or and kind of hitting it, it's sometimes hard for especially men to sort of stand up and, take that. Yeah. So, yeah, I say confidence coach, but it's about accountability, really.
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of people sometimes get too tied up with the titles and, maybe they see that, I don't, it just, you're a guy who's trying to help other men and you hold them accountable.
That's right.
That's just, it's as simple as you need to be. So, for me, we just met recently.
Yep.
So why don't you give the listeners and myself a little bit of background about you, where you're from, how you grew up, all the good details.
Okay, well, as I said, I'm from England. I'm from London, originally, East London, part of East London called sort of Waltham Forest, Leytonstone, Stratford, that kind of thing for anybody who's kind of familiar. And I grew up in that sort of single parent council estate. Council estate for you guys might be kind of projects type of thing. So we grew up like that, mum and five of us. Yeah, so yeah, 4 other siblings. So dads weren't around at the time. I suppose it was poverty. Well, it was fun poverty, but I think it was poverty. And really, just grew up like that, loving life really, and just getting through. But finding, just having a normal kind of school life. Didn't do too well coming out of school because obviously we start to look at the wrong things, girls and popularity and. Being I suppose being these guys who are being led by these other guys, but not really no real role models in the environment and stuff like that.
Yep.
So went through school, came out with little or nothing in terms of qualifications, but was always had a strong work ethic because we was always taught to have a strong work ethic. So worked in small jobs and stuff like that. And I think when I got to around, in my early 20s, I started doing business because obviously I'm a coach, but I'm a coach via entrepreneurialism. So I run
Okay.
a business. I'm a businessman. Yeah. So that's when I started to sort of do small parts of business. Um, Realized I wanted to be a little bit more, wanted to do a little bit more for myself. So went back into education at around 21, studied psychology, pushed myself on from there, and done a master's in business. Yeah, my business was in the clothing industry, and that's where I got familiar with New York, because I used to come to New York on a regular basis and buy brands like, because I'm a bit older, you can see the grays, buy brands
Yeah.
like Academics and Fubu and Anichi and
Hmm.
Rockaware and those sort of brands. And yeah, my first business was sort of in the menswear section, just like buying clothes from here and there. And
So what year is this around when you're going back and forth to New York?
right, so I'm going to say that's about, if we say 25 years ago.
Okay, yeah, because you're throwing out some brand names when I'm thinking like, okay, this is
Okay.
going back there a little bit.
Yeah. So
I mean, I got some gray in the beard too, so yeah,
right.
I'm not that far
It's
behind
all
you.
good. It's all good. Yeah. So that's really what I used to do. So, but I used to, again, I'm going to do the conversion. I started my first business selling clothes out of the trunk, out of the car, which we call
Hmm.
the boot of the car over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my first business, but that kind of connected me with people and brands, and sort of the psychology of that was making people feel good for how they dressed,
Hmm.
looking good, feeling good, right?
Yeah, they
So
go hand in hand.
yeah, so that was then, and yeah, right. So as I said, I went back to education, studied psychology, but at the same time I was doing business, started a family at the same time, hustle bustle,
Hmm.
So yeah, so fast forward, I don't do so much of the fashion business now. I've still got a little print company that I run, but I made a transition from about the age of 27 into property,
Hmm.
and started buying that property. So now, where I sit now is I'm sort of a property entrepreneur. I have a couple other businesses. I do some work with young people, gang affiliated stuff, and really the coaching is like the culmination of all that experience. And along that journey, I think I always found that women were quite organized, and
Hmm.
I found that women sort of didn't mind to kind of ask for help and ask for the support. But I realized going through, I always had difficulty with men,
Hmm.
in different ways, different arenas, but just always used to look at, because of my sort of interest in the science of mind and behavior. I used to find that men used to be kind of quite awkward. Their emotions kind of would get away the best of them in forms of hate, or,
Yeah.
or, or, or not being able to show love, you know?
Well, that's one of the things about men. The one emotion that we're allowed to show is anger.
Right.
You know,
So I
that's one of the
thought,
things we're
yeah,
fighting against.
yeah. So that's what I used to find. I mean, even on my website, I've been kind of open about the fathers in my life, because I'd say I had two fathers, my biological and my what they call stepfather.
Yeah, same thing here.
Yeah, and I think both of those men, um, they showed me how not to be, maybe,
Mm.
possibly. Um, but I don't have any, real angst or any really problems with them. But obviously, the journey was another learning curve, and I think sometimes men, again, are unable to kind of reconcile some of the stuff they may have gone through, and some of the absence. So I think that from those fathers, some friends, um, yeah, so fathers, friends, and just general society, just looking at how men were, it was like, do you know what? We need to try and get involved and try and do some work around men. And obviously, the stats, a lot of stats on, depression and
Hmm.
what do you call it?
Suicide.
Suicide, prison population, and all that good stuff. Well, not good stuff,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
so all of that all together, I said, well, I want to try and use this, all my experience and knowledge, and start to push and work with the hardest group of people on the planet, being men.
Yeah, you ain't kidding, man. It's what we were just talking about before. Excuse me, before we started recording, is that there's so many walls to get through with guys, so much ego and pride in the way, and as a guy, I can say I've been right there. It's hard to take those walls down and kind of be vulnerable.
That's right,
and that's a huge thing.
Yeah, vulnerability being the key word, but again, the word that men don't even want to even stand anywhere near, because they feel that there's a weakness going on there.
Definitely.
So I think that's the story. That's the kind of express story, and it kind of and I try to kind of explain my why.
So you said you started a family. You have kids, a wife. How does that?
I'm married. I've got 4 children. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I'm there. And they're, most of them are adults. I've only got one that's a young adult. I'm a granddad even now.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I started as soon as I could. So.
Yeah. Hey, I'm a stepfather. About 2 years now, and it's crazy, but I really like it. It gives me a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning.
Yes.
And also having that responsibility for another life.
Yes.
It makes you become more aware and more thoughtful about things, and I can appreciate the changes I felt with that.
No, definitely. I think I had my first child when I was 17 in my first, I say my first relationship, for want of a better term. So I was still a teenager and a father at the same time, and obviously made some mistakes along that part of the journey. But I always feel that I was quite committed, even at that stage, to my child, and she's going to be 30 soon.
Oh shit!
Yeah, so and we're good. We're good. So I suppose it's a shout out to men like yourself, or men who I think we have to try and look at fatherhood not in a negative way or it's taking things away from us, but what value it adds to us.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always bring up with people when we get into the topic of fatherhood is that, there's a big difference between a mother and a father. A mother, you literally come from your mother's body. That's a built-in connection that you can't replace, you can't fake it. That is something that's very remarkable, a mother-child bond. But your father is like the first person you meet that's not, you haven't been physically attached to. You know what I mean? So it almost becomes your basis for how you build relationships throughout your whole life. Mm-hmm. I feel like every relationship you have in your life is somehow linked to the relationship you have with your father.
Yeah.
So it's a huge responsibility that I don't think a lot of people give enough credit to, and they really acknowledge how deeply it can affect a human being and the way they build relationships in their entire life.
I mean, that's a good point. It's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, but all right, so it's good. I like getting dads on here. So how did the coaching start? Like, what really was there a point in time? Was there something that happened to you that really made something click in your head that really motivated you to do this?
I think for me, as I said, I've always, since I studied psychology, I didn't actually know at the time why I chose psychology, but I've always been interested in people, and I've always been, I suppose, that sort of go-to person or come-to person. People who come to you after advice, mm-hmm. information on stuff. And when I stopped selling clothes out of the boot of the car, then I had a small retail store for a little while. I mean, a little while. I had for about 15 years. But what I actually found was that more people were coming to me, because it was a menswear store. More people were coming to me, sort of talking to me and telling me their problems. And, mm-hmm. I was always on the shop floor, sort of, advising people. And then I realized I started to look at like the sales of the business and mm-hmm. the amount of people were coming through, and there was a kind of an imbalance. So I started to think, well, you know what, there's something in this. And as I said, I think from a younger age, I have taken that role in the community or in, wherever I've been. a guy who's got that information and, go to. So I think I started with, as I said, doing some stuff with young people, gangs and stuff like that. But again, what I realized was that, young people are kind of not sure where they want to go, getting involved in stuff. But then I looked around at my peers and, and just in the media, and you're realizing that, adults don't really have it that made up. There's a lot of gaps in their self-development or whatever, to be polite. I'm going to try and be as polite as possible,
You could say it. A lot of adults don't know what the hell they're talking about.
So we're trying to fight youth issues, but we're not looking at the adults. It's not about blame. It's not about being in the blame culture. But then you had a lot of people who were maybe then you start looking at mothers, and then single parent mothers, and then the absent fathers come in, but they're not just fathers; they're men out here. And as I said to you, I've had relationships with business partners over the time, and friends, and I just find it's a funny time, and I just think that even some of your closest friends even find it difficult to open up and be honest and be vulnerable. So that's when I just said I was in the position, I suppose financially, to start to look at another angle of business and another angle that what I feel is my purpose, really, because as I said, I've always been that character, but now I've got the experience and the knowledge. And maybe people could look at me as someone who's taken myself from, poverty to novelty, if you want to call it that,
Oh, yeah, that counts for a lot in people's eyes. They see you've built something out of very little.
Yeah, that's right. So that is really what I'd say is why I started the coaching. I think it's taken me a while to even get here, and I don't even know. I wouldn't even say I'm that far. But but I'm just going to kind of chip away at the old block, because, as I said, it's men we're dealing with here. So, it's going to take. I'm appreciating it's going to take some time.
Yeah, I think that's what we're all doing. A lot of the men like us that are in this position where we're trying to reach out and create like a community of men that are helping one another. It takes a little time. Like you said, we're a tough nut to crack, men.
That's what I was. That's what I said on one of my Instagram posts. With exactly that. I put a nutcracker and said, men, hard nut to crack, most definitely.
Yeah. You were talking about how you realize as you get older that there's a lot of adults who maybe don't have it all figured out like we thought when we were young. And I'm thinking like, when we were young, we had a friend who would tell us something. Oh, did you know, such and such, blah, blah, like chocolate milk comes from brown cows or some bullshit like that. Yeah. And oh man, it blew my mind right there. And then you grow up and you're like, that guy didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. And then you grow up, and then you meet an adult and you hear them say something, and there's no way that's true. Yeah. And it's like you're no different from the little kid on the playground. That's right. You're just a little bigger.
That's right. That's right.
That was a big a revelation for me, especially. I don't know about you, but the first time you find you disagree with your parents tell you something, and then that just doesn't sound right at all. You know that feeling? And it's a scary thing, because it almost makes you feel like I'm going to have to figure this all out for myself, because I don't know who to listen to anymore.
Yeah. I think I could come in there with in terms of like culture. A lot of the time, my parents are from Jamaica. So that's where my sort of, I was born in England, as I said, but my parents are from Jamaica. So they grew up in a totally different time. They were immigrants into the UK. So, they came here. And at that time in England, there was a lot of racism and stuff like that. So you're now dealing with a set of people who have come over, been welcomed over to a country, got here and realized, oh, no, we don't actually want you. You've got all your opportunities, all your dreams and aspirations were probably smashed. And then obviously you still got to live, so you still, do what you got to do. Then you have kids. Then you come up with some stuff that maybe worked for maybe not even you, your grandparents back in Jamaica in 1907. Do you know what I mean? And you're carrying it forward. So then you're passing it down to sort of Western kids who are now sort of mixing with, British people. So I think further to the point, a lot of the time when they're telling us stuff, it's like, yo, that worked in, I don't know, in all due respect, bush in man yourself. But where we're here now, trying to, do this British thing, as difficult as that can be, you really get to that space where, it's even as much as like your homework. If your parents weren't educated to a certain point, how are they going to help you with your homework and direct you in terms of how to get on? Because they may not have had the opportunities themselves. So it's a big picture, that parent thing, or listen to your elders, that one.
Yeah.
Respect your elders, and then you realize that your uncle was just what you may call a bum on the corner, but when you was little, he was Uncle whoever. So, and that's not to disrespect anybody but it's just to give the kind of point that this is what happens. We kind of get educated or guided by adults who probably didn't know, like we're saying, didn't know.
They were right where we are now.
There you go.
That me personally, that's something I always struggle with, is that the imposter syndrome. I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing, and it's only a matter of time before everyone figures that out. I think that's, when you look back, it's like, my parents probably felt the same way. And I think that also makes you kind of look back at, maybe things your parents, maybe you feel they did a few things wrong, but it makes you look back a little more generously and give them a little bit of leeway,
Definitely. I mean, that's what I was saying with the thing with my fathers, my two fathers. Like, I have no ill, but I have a relationship with both. And I don't see my stepfather as much, but my biological father, he, I see him, and he's a certain age now, and I don't have any problems whatsoever, because I've done the math, I've done the, I'm a thinker, I've worked on myself, and I realized that, they did what they could at that time, with the mindset that they had. So, me holding a grudge, or anybody out there, to hold a grudge on what people did yesterday, forget about it, man, as much as you can, because it's not going to serve you to keep holding it anyway. No,
you're 100% right. And then for me, it's a little different. Like, I have the same thing. I have my biological father and my stepfather. I'm very close, as close as I can be with my stepfather. He's a great man, and he's been there since I was about 6 years old. Right. But, the relationship with my biological father is pretty rocky. Like, we haven't spoken in years. Right. But it's also one of those things where I try to look back and be, as, like I said, as generous as possible. It's like he was young when I was born. He didn't have really a lot going on. But, a lot of mistakes can be excused. But when you look back throughout the timeline, and you keep seeing the same mistakes over and over and over without any effort to learn and to grow, it's hard to, for some people to look back favorably. But at least, like you said, to hold on to the grudge and to hold on to that negative energy, that's toxic for me as a person. So I let that go. And I think, for some, go ahead.
No, I was saying it doesn't serve. And I think this is why we're doing the work today, to kind of create the change that we want to see.
Exactly.
Because even look at self-development. Look at all this stuff that wasn't about then. They didn't have time for that. They had time to get on and make do. It wasn't. There was no Google. There was no real libraries. Or if you wasn't educated to a standard, how are you going to start looking into yourself and getting?
Of course.
So I think that in that respect alone, you've got to stand up and say, well, the good book, The Power of Now. Let's just deal with the now, and let's just see what we can do. And if we can be, as you called it, good men, then the men of tomorrow can look at us as role models, as coaches, guiders, or whatever. And I think that's how the future that's the only way we're going to change the future.
Yeah, well, it's all by example,
There you go.
But it's actually, and like you said it earlier on, it's like you learned not so much what to do, but what not to do. Yeah. That's my way of positively looking back on whatever bad things happen. To go, well, look, now I know what not to do. Yeah. Yeah. So it's you got to turn.
And it's the message that we've got to send out there to men and whoever's listening to the show.
Yeah, it applies to everyone, not just men.
Yeah, that's right. So there's whoever's listening. That is just a great kind of nugget, if any, to click onto. Just somebody does that. You didn't like it, didn't feel good. We don't do it to someone else.
Lesson learned.
sure there's some kind of biblical thing, but I'm not too good at that. So
Yeah, me neither. Don't worry. So, are there like, what are some common issues you see? Like, are there recurring things you see when you talk to young men, guys that you may, mentor? Like, what are some of the things, especially nowadays? I feel like the way the culture is and how open everything is, a lot of people are much more, present and able to speak about things that might have been held in generations past. What are some of the things you see that are commonalities with men today?
Men, there's time is always the problem. They haven't got enough time to do anything, and they haven't got any money. They ain't got no time and they ain't got no money, and there's just constant justifications for the reasons why they can't do anything, in opposed to why they, how they can. I think that's getting that's where you talk about the ego and men, and I feel men being a hard nut to crack because they make it sound so good.
Yeah.
Like you have to second guess yourself sometimes when you're listening, because you're like, no, but that's an excuse. So yeah, I think a lot of people are running around making cool excuses. They really, and some people who are really like well versed or speak well, have got a stylish way of speaking. They make it even, you can almost not catch them out because it sounds so great. Their justifications of their
great salesman.
Yeah, there you go.
No, that's true. That's something I see too here. Is a lot of people, they want to show like how busy they are, how much they're doing. There's not enough time in the day, as if that in and of itself is some kind of virtue. It's okay. It's one thing to be busy all the time, but what are you working towards? What are you building? Yeah. Like, how is that time spent? Are you just busy and nothing's getting accomplished? Are you just telling everyone you're busy? There's a lot of talk, but it's like, where is any of this going?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of substance a lot of times.
Yeah. The saying "talk is cheap" springs to my mind. I'm like, that's where that saying comes from, because, I think I like, I'm, like I said, I'm an entrepreneur, so I like business. I think about different ideas every day. So I tend to sort of do work around, business and business startup and things like that. But I even look at people who have to go to work every day and think, well, think more enterprising. Don't feel like victimized all the time, and then if I had more money. Like, how many times are you going to say that? Because we all know, if I come in through £1 million, dollars, yen, whatever it is, on your table tomorrow, and you are not used to managing that sort of money, you won't be able to do anything anyway. So that's why it's an excuse. So hopefully I've answered the question. It's just those time, money excuses that people are running around using. That's what I think is a general theme.
That's a great point. I know I posted some kind of quote about the same thing. If you can't manage $1,000, what makes you think you're going to be able to manage $100,000? It's that idea that men say, if I just get more of this, I'll be okay. If I just get more money, like everything will work out. It's like, well, you're probably going to end up making the same choices that brought you here, unless you are working on changing the situation. You know.
Yeah.
Like that. That's a great thing. It's like the money is not the answer. It's what you do that's the answer. How are you going to be different?
That's right. And I think you here earlier, it's like, and it sounds all a bit woo-ish, but like, what's your purpose? Why are you here? What are you here to do? What's your interest really? What are you passionate about? Because then I go down that sort of road of money being a byproduct of your passion. So therefore, it can't be a problem or an excuse, because if you know what you want to do, you know what you enjoy, you get that money stuff anyway. That's how it works. But as I said, you kind of push this money thing up. Everybody know, like we could get a pen and paper out now and start putting 10 is 20 and 30. And if you don't spend so much money on this, then we can work it out. It's not that difficult. But I find that's why I say, men, they come up with all this pretty salesy talk. So it's almost like you can't break down their objections, or if you do challenge them, they're men, aren't they? So you may get a situation where the defense mechanisms start coming out, the shoulders start going back, and now, they could feel offended.
No, that you're 100% right. I mean, there's guys in my life, guys I love dearly,
Yes.
who they spend all their time working, and it's what do you like? One of the things I say, like in my line of work, I'm an electrician. I work in construction,
Okay.
so if there's overtime,
Yep.
maybe only two guys can work overtime. So some guys jump at the opportunity, other guys won't even go near it. But it's like, what are you really gaining? Like you're essentially what it is, what we do for work every day, we're selling time out of our lives.
There you
Like
go.
it's not just we're doing a service, we're literally selling them parts of our lives.
Yep.
And they're paying us with, cash.
Yep.
So you have to really ask someone, and a lot of times it makes people really kind of step back and think, what is my time really worth? Because think of the things I could be doing with it. Maybe I have a family. Maybe my kid is, in soccer, and if he knew his dad was there watching him, he would have maybe played a little harder and maybe scored that goal.
Yep.
But I was working.
Yep.
I got more money now. We can afford to go out to a nice dinner, the whole family. But I maybe missed something more important.
Yep. Yep.
And it's a struggle I find with a lot of guys because listen, the bills got to get paid one way or the other. So we need to do that.
Yep.
But when does the balance go out of whack?
And when do you start? If you want more money, it's not like you just saying that. You're exchanging your time for money. So this is when I go down that road of, right, okay, so you've got argument's sake 8 hours that you can go to work for, and you might get a bit overtime, but that's all you've got. So now it's about how can I create leverage in, I'm not going to go too far off the track, but how can I create leverage off of those 8 hours? Because you've only got the 8 times 5 or 6 or whatever. So if you step back and realize that, you can now change your thought processes to start to think about, right, well, that's not going to change.
Yeah.
How can I change? How can I look at this situation differently? Because the extra meal or it's still spending. It's still, chasing, rat race, So I think that's what, after we get over the fact that it can't be the time or the money, we start to look at, right, how can we sort of adapt our mind to look at this thing slightly different,
Yeah. That's a big thing, is figuring out how can we maximize the amount that we can get from our time. Because if we're going to be spending time away from our families, away from our loved ones, how can we get the most out of that? Because it's a sacrifice, when you boil it down, that is a sacrifice. So how can we get the most back in exchange for that, And that's a hard thing to do because a lot of people don't have, like you said, a lot of options. Maybe you come from a situation, you're not that well off. It's not as easy as just saying, well, I'm going to go bargain with my boss and I'm going to get a raise. Not everybody has that option. So
that's right. Not everybody has that option, but I think it ties back round to why men need to start to think about maybe I could speak to somebody else or read a book or look at what other people have done before me to live a lifestyle that creates more or whatever. You see my point? So, because if not, then you will be like the, thousands, millions of others crying that same tune. But we also do know that there are people, celebrity types and others that have been able to turn that corner. It's possible to do things different in a different way. It's possible to, I'm going to say it, run your own business. It's possible to, as I said, just maybe, I don't know, just have 2 guys and you get a contract and help them out and, earn a little bit more off of each. There are ways. But as I said, if we don't start to look at those possibilities, we then don't have any option but to cry the same old cry.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, like, that's perfect because it's, like you said, there's opportunities out there as long as we're, mentally flexible enough to try to create those opportunities where you might not necessarily see them, but you have to put yourself there. You have to really do the work, and it requires a lot of self-awareness and, thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
So that's
visualization.
Yes,
Visualization,
definitely.
because as I said, when you asked me the story, when I was, I don't know, 5, 6, and just had my mum, and bills were, things were tight. I mean, in this country, you had, let me say, when you go to school, you had like free school meals and free uniform tickets or whatever. That became a norm to me. I thought that was life. That things, people just give you stuff for free. So, but I had to, as I kind of got along in life, I just had to kind of look around. I didn't have any money at that time to be able to pay for anything, but you look around and you try and get inspiration from places. And you do, and you always see through the media, and in them times it wasn't social media, it might be but someone's doing a little bit better out here than others. Now, why is this? And you inquire, you get inspired, and you start to just look a bit further out, and then you just try to follow. You start benchmarking and whatever, and then you kind of move on from there.
So I think we're pretty much on the same wavelength as far as this next topic goes. My question was, do you feel like society's ideas of what it means to be a man and what masculinity is, do you feel like our ideas on that need to evolve? Do you feel like it's time for maybe things to change a little bit? And I know that to a lot of men, that's a scary thing. It's like, well, why do we need to change? There's people that are very resistant to that idea. But what's your opinion on it?
I think it comes down to looking in the mirror and looking at what type of man you are today. And if some of the typical expectations of a man are positive parts and you possess those positive parts, then carry on in that vein. But some of the stuff, which is I call it the old alpha kind of visual. I think that doesn't serve much of a purpose if you don't care about other people, other human beings, if you are just driven by your ego, if you think that your self-image is more important than anything else, and you can't, like I said, you can't tap into self. So a lot of the imagery, especially now modern day times where we've got social media and it's very visual, there are a lot of negative kind of connotations, and this toxic masculinity is real. But I think that there's also parts of male characteristics that have worked for men and have assisted women and wider society. So I just think that I think it's like doing almost a checklist on yourself, and just making sure that parts that you have taken on, or and how you look at life and how you deal with people. If you feel that you are in the right frame and you're good to everybody around you, then carry on in your vein. But some of this surface level stuff, I think men definitely have to change.
Yeah, I think it's in my opinion, it seems like a lot of the values that we as men normally associate with masculinity and strength and and reason and kind of like conviction, like being almost stubbornness to an extent. A lot of those things that we associate with as masculine are not even necessarily exclusively masculine traits. And a lot of the things that we associate with femininity are not inherently feminine. It's not something that only a woman can do, or something only a man can do. I think just our ideas on those things just kind of need to broaden a little bit in the 21st century. Like certain emotions, certain feelings we commonly associate with femininity, like empathy for one thing. Healing and caring. That's something that we always associate with women. But if you look at it, that's really just a human thing. There's nothing inherently feminine about that. And I
Yeah.
think we view it that way to our detriment as men. That was kind of how we were raised. Those were the values that we were taught. But at the same time, it's keeping us very ill prepared for the world that we live in today.
For the modern day, yeah, 100%. I think what was going through my mind when you were speaking, sometimes you read this stuff. I think some of those stereotypes or some of those kind of characteristics, they've come from a time when, caveman times and past those times, and in the Industrial Revolution, when it was the men, were the breadwinners and, all this sort of stuff. And that's changed. That's changed from a longer time still. So, yeah, I mean, even when you're saying empathy, I think that's standard for us as men to, if you don't have empathy, yeah, there's a big problem. And yes, men have seemingly got away with it, or, a set of men have got away with it, but regular men, everyday men walking up and down, if you don't possess that one, you're going to struggle out here. You're going to definitely struggle out there.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's something that's gotten us as men into trouble, because some of our behavior, I feel like, would naturally sort itself out if we were looking at it through a bit more of an empathic lens. If we kind of were a bit more self-aware and we're paying attention to how our actions affected those around us,
Yep.
maybe we wouldn't do so many of the things we do. Maybe I don't think it would necessarily change us as human beings, but maybe we'd be a bit more careful about how we act. A lot of times, especially nowadays in the year 2019, with the Me Too movement, you hear about guys who've been in situations romantically with women when this consent was not necessarily clear, and you find yourself in this gray area where, I didn't think that I was doing anything that was unwanted, but at the same time, were you really paying attention to what the signs were? Were you being empathetic to the situation that the woman was in at that present time? And I feel like that's something that could really filter out and branch out into so many other aspects of our lives.
I agree with you there. And the word ego springs to mind. We've, our egos have always kind of got, they've been kind of, you've been patted on your back for those kind of ego-tripping behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So like you say, the Me Too movement has brought up a lot of this stuff. But again, like what you say, if it's emotional intelligence, they're calling it these days, isn't it? If there was more emotional intelligence, less ego, and, as I said, just being all round grounded, because I think a lot of the guys who have been caught up in those kind of scenarios, when you look at it, these are guys who were talented, or they were positioned, and they got chances in life, where there was a lot of people who didn't, because the media, music, all this sort of stuff, only a few get through the gates anyway. It's not that people are not talented. So people need to realize that, listen, I'm gifted, and but again, if you're not thinking in any kind of an emotional way, you won't even recognize that you're cherishing your gift or your passion. So don't abuse that position,
Definitely.
So I think, but I think again, maybe I'm going off topic, but the toxic masculinity and all these kind of characteristics that have been pushed up as men, I think they come out of only a certain percentage of men over the time and filtered down and became the norm. So it is time now to say, well, that never worked.
Yeah,
that it never worked, and now you've got so many men in turmoil because of that backlash.
Definitely, 100%. How would you define toxic masculinity? Because that's a term that is really kind of fraught, and I've wrestled with it a lot. I feel like that goes back to what we were just saying before, how a lot of these characteristics that we would associate with toxic masculinity, quote unquote, are not inherently masculine behaviors. It's just bad behaviors that can be exhibited in either sex or any sex. Excuse me.
I think it comes down to that labeling theory, and I think toxic masculinity to me is just, I almost look at it like the images now. Like Instagram. These images images of, you know, let me just, like even gang members, and because people buy into being, I'm going to get into the gang, I'm going to be bad, I'm going to be a criminal, I'm going to be on the road, however you term it. But that's an image that you're buying into, which is toxic, because when you get in there, there's some stuff that kind of suits you, but there's a lot of stuff that is not going to get you anywhere too fast. I don't know if it was I think I was reading about you, but the gym, everyone's pumped up and, pumped up till they can't move. Like, there's more parts of your body that you have to work out, and there's your mind that needs to be worked out. So, sometimes you see people just, tatted up, tats all over, muscles, but what are you thinking about? What do you feel?
What's going on behind those eyes?
Yeah. So the toxic masculinity thing for me is like really about imagery. Even clothes. I've been in fashion, as I said, and I like to dress. I like buy stuff, but I think that we can be dressed up and we can have the latest stuff. But it comes back to, again, what are we thinking about? So to me, when I think about toxic masculinity, it comes from images. And then it can be really kind of spread through media. So again, it's all about just we've all got to be checking out ourselves.
What do you think? I mean, you're bigger. You're on Instagram just like I am. Like you have a good sized following. What do you think about these guys who try to reclaim the word toxic as if that's some kind of like I'm going to turn it back against you. Like, you say masculinity is toxic. Well, now we're going to be toxic men. Like we're going to show you like the toxic men are the ones that protect you while you sleep. They try to twist it around and they try to wear like a badge of honor, so to speak.
Yeah, but toxic is toxic, mate.
Yeah, there's no good way to use that word.
Yeah, it's toxic, mate. It poisons things. You know what I mean? And as I said before, like there are parts of male characteristics that over history and over time, we are, physically stronger, built in a certain way, and have protected other people, our women, and all the rest of it. Something we should be proud of, and something that's got us to where we are today. And I don't think there'll be a woman on the planet who chooses men as their partners who would not like to feel protected.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So in that respect, that's good, but I wouldn't call that toxic.
Exactly.
I call it being a protective partner.
Yeah.
Or, just being a man then. So I'm not the one we shouldn't run away from our title as men. But I wouldn't, like word is power. So if you think it's clever to flip the word toxic because you want to win an argument, that's only your ego talking anyway. That's my answer.
Definitely. I like that's a good answer. No, I see so much of this stuff now, just in dealing with people on Instagram and the internet and Twitter and everything. And I just feel like, are you going to call yourself, I'm a toxic man. I stand up, I protect my family. I do this like, well, do you really understand what the word toxic means? Like you just kind of destroyed your own argument right there. Like, because none of those things you said are toxic. So I feel like not a lot of people are dealing enough with the nuance of how this works. It's almost like they want to try to claim their own form of victimhood. Say, we're oppressed because society's out to feminize men and emasculate them. And I say, well, that's really not what's happening. Like, I mean,
no, not at all. I think we've got choices. We've got choices, and like I think you used the word victim. If you are a part of any victim, if you are a part of any culture that wants to be victimized, there are other cultures. Like I was explaining to you, I'm a black man from the UK. Right? So there was times when we was young. I'm not going to say I don't even think it was as bad as sort of America, because British people are more sophisticated with this.
Hey, listen, when it comes to racism, we're pretty good here in America. Right. Okay.
So they're a bit more sophisticated with this stuff. But what you could be left with is a mental, a feeling of not being worth. Your self-esteem, so you kind of run into the stereotypes. Do you know what I mean? But and I think a lot of people do say, well, and they run into it and they become what people expected or what people labelled you as. But when it doesn't benefit you, because it won't benefit you in the long run, then you're going to still be blaming someone. So I think we need to just, it comes back to what I said, we need to be held accountable or ask for help. We need to check ourselves out. We need to, as I said, defeminate, men are being demasculated and all that sort of stuff. Well, if that's what's happening and you're not happy with that, do something about it.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You cut out for a second there.
No, I was saying when say like a man says that he's being, men are being demasculated and that sort of stuff. Well, if that's what you think's happening, then you've got choices. You see that coming, and it's not something you want for yourself. Sort it out, and don't be a victim, and don't go around. Oh yeah, this is what's happening to us, because you're a victim. You're still being a victim. You know?
Well, that's something I've seen, especially in dealing with the conversation surrounding race, is a lot of times as people, not just men, just people in general, you spend so much time fighting against these bad ideas and against these bad ideologies and bad people who practice them, that sometimes, if you're not careful, you can end up becoming the thing you hate. You end up, you end up resenting so much the other side that you end up sometimes doing the same things that they did to you, and that's a huge pitfall that can be easy to fall into if you're not careful.
And that's I don't know where I cut out, but that's the exact point I made when I said about being a black boy from London or whatever, and everybody you're supposed to turn out to this drug dealer, or you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to have 1,000 women, 1,000 kids, and all this sort of stuff, and no one expects anything more from you. And that's the point I made. If you're unable to sort of wake up and smell the coffee, as it were, and realize that, hold on a minute, this isn't me, this is somebody trying to push something on me. We as human beings have choices. It's not easy. So anyone who's listening out there, especially when it comes to race, I know people are like, what's he talking about? And they start going crazy. But my point is, to keep it in context, you can only be, if you accept and open yourself up to other people's words of power. If you open up yourself, you then, like you said, you become it. And that's why stereotyping works. It works because, psychology I've studied. So when you look at studies in psychology, people have been studying the human mind and behavior for donkey's years. So therefore, they know, media has known what to do for a long time to control people. So what we're talking about now with toxic masculinity, it could be down to divide and conquer. Because while we've got you distracted, fighting about whether you're a man, whether you're a strong man, you're this man, that man, like somebody else is doing something else.
Whether you're an alpha or a beta or any of those stupid terms.
Yeah. I mean, we can use them. Like me, I use the, so like I talk about raise your roar. So I thought, well, alpha male, lion, roar. So let's have a new world alpha then. So let's have a new world alpha, raise your roar, be the lion, be the king of your jungle and all that. That's fine. But that's just the king of your life. Manage your life, own your life, roar like a lion, be who you want to be. That's what I, instead of, alpha, beta, I just looked at it, I studied it for a little while, and I thought, well, okay, people, in terms of sellability, people who are aware of this alpha, I wasn't even aware. I started to study it because I was just me.
Is there such a thing as alphas in humans? Because I remember reading that was just something that, that exists in the animal kingdom.
Animal kingdom, that's right. But somehow it was transferred into the human existence. So I said, well, where's my start point? And my start point will be at this alpha male thing. But I'm talking about the new man, the good man, like we said. But I'll start it from somewhere where people have kind of, it's a recognizable thing. But I'm going to say, well, let's look at it. Let's shake it up a little bit. And this new alpha, I like the lion in it. So, and lions are strong, it's got good connotation. And so
House Lannister, red and gold.
Yeah. So to me, as long as I said this play on words and things change with time. So we as men have to change with time.
I agree 100%.
Not going to work for men today, but don't be a victim. Never be a victim.
No, that's great advice. Before we go, I'm going to touch on this a little bit. Do you feel like things have been different on your side of the pond as it has been on ours? I mean, I know with social media, it's really bridged the gap, so everything seems close. Like I know I get a lot of news from the UK here, so I've been reading up on the Brexit situation and Boris Johnson and all that good mess. But do you feel like, as far as the social issues like we're talking about, do you feel like that's really different on either side, or?
I think with coaching specifically, and men starting to look inwardly at themselves, and men starting to ask for help and advice and joining men's groups. And I think that, I don't know if it's the economy of scale, if there's more people, but I think in the US and Australia, I find that the movements are a bit further ahead.
Okay.
I feel that men seem to be opening up more on that side. I don't know if because we're smaller, so it might be that. It might just be an economy of scale thing. But I think we were speaking briefly before, I think globalization's made it kind of a bit more closer because we're in the same brands, and we can see each other now more clearly through the media. So, things have just become sort of one thing. There's not really, I know at one time American style might have been a bit more loose, a bit baggy, sports t-shirts and all that sort of stuff. But I think now globalization's given a bit more of a one order. But in terms of the self-development has been much bigger. You've got more, come on, let's do this X, that X, and you're very, really more go-get-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this is my opinion from the UK. So even when I'm trying to do marketing and trying to find my voice, the Americans kind of are loud.
Yeah.
The Americans, it's a gross generalization, but I'm just saying.
It's coming from a good place. Don't worry.
Yeah, very loud and very in your face, and it's very, I think the top public speakers and stuff like that will be Americans in opposed to the English. And I think if the English, the ones who are kind of bigger, they're kind of following a pattern. Okay. That was kind of designed in the US or Australia, and they're following that. They're learning the psychology of people, so they're using a 1, 2, 3, 4 step to get people kind of signed up and empowered and pumped and that sort of stuff. So that's the only rule. I think that's the difference in this industry that I've seen. And so my thing is to really just get my English perspective and my English voice over. And I think I'm energetic when I'm ready, but I think there's a conservative kind of style that I think is needed when you're doing work with people.
No, it's a good counterbalance. I mean, you're definitely right. As far as, especially when it comes to like the coaches, like guys like yourself, the American one's definitely a lot more in your face, a lot of hand movement in the camera, and with yours, it's definitely much more thoughtful and very what's the word I'm looking for? Very measured. Like you is a much tighter economy of words when you speak. So
I think that's what I'm trying, but I don't know if I sometimes feel that there's this is why it's important to kind of get out, and I thank you very much for giving me this time and this platform.
Hey, my pleasure, brother.
Yeah, because I think that because I call it industry because there is an industry, because they're loud, they're the leads on things, they tend to be the leads on things. So even for your own self-esteem and confidence, you could feel a little bit, if you don't keep that confidence up, you could feel a little bit like, oh, I don't feel as great as they do because they've got all these lights, camera action and in your face. As I said, if I build a relationship with a potential client or a client, and we agree that we want to be all up in your face, and that's the way that you learn, that's the way that you receive information, then we can do that. We can turn it up as it would, as you call it. But I feel that we from this side there's a different style, a different way of being, and it's something I want to really push. and really connect with people who may feel that they don't want that all up in your face. Yeah.
So
that's
the last thing I'm going to ask you before we get out of here, is there anybody or any few people that you feel really were role models for you, or someone that you looked up to, almost someone that inspired you to get into this industry? Like even any speakers, like I know for me, like I listen to podcasts all the time. So there's different podcast hosts that I really look up to, guys that have been in this line of work that are doing something I think is positive, and that's what I want to kind of get my own form of.
Yeah, it's funny because I suppose, and this is on a little, I like Gary Vee's style.
Okay.
Even though he is very, but there seems to be he's in your face, but there's a kind of telling you like it is kind of thing, and it's quite stylish because he kind of he gives it to you. He gives it to you when I watch some of his stuff. It's given to you. It's always in a natural environment.
He seems very aloof, like, "Hey, I'm going to give you this great advice. If you don't want it, go F yourself." Yeah.
Kind of thing. So I think I liked him, and just general people. I think more for me, it's more looking around and thinking to myself that I think I could be further on even in my entrepreneurial life if men were more open and not so closed and competitive and closed. Because as I said, you read. To me, this world is definitely a world of abundance and not scarcity.
Yes.
And
that's something you've spoken about in your posts I've been reading.
Yeah. That's big for me because, so therefore, to answer your question, that's why I can look at so many things and people and be inspired. Because as I said, sometimes when you don't feel, because of your background and because of how you've been made to feel in society, it's hard to kind of look, and sometimes it's hard to be inspired by people.
That's true.
In the modern day time, I say people like Gary Vee. He's cool. He's doing his bit, and I would, I want people to see me in that way. I'd like to, and I think he's very entrepreneurial. So, not just he's entrepreneurial outside of his work that he does. Whereas a lot of the other guys, they kind of, there's a big show going on. You can see it's clear. Yes. So I think I give that to Gary Vee, and then I look around at a couple other people. I get inspiration. You inspire me, my brother. Like anybody who's out doing the work, I'm inspired. That's the closing comment.
You really playing to the audience there. Hey, my brother, thank you very much for sharing your time. I really appreciate it. This is a good conversation. I genuinely enjoyed it, and good. I'd like to have you back in the future if you're cool with it.
No, man, we're connected now. So it's
beautiful.
Connected.
Well, again, thank you. Why don't you give the listeners your Instagram, wherever they can find you?
Right. So you can find me on Eldridge Cook 1 on the Instagram, and my website is www.eldridgecook.com. That's where I play around both between those two places. So follow me there. I'm happy to, DM me and ask me any questions, because I prefer to get feedback from people so I can build bigger and better content.
Definitely. That goes for all of us content creators. We need the feedback from the audience.
People don't know, but when you feel like you're just talking to yourself, you want to be confident. You keep the confidence going, but that feeling as if there's some tumbleweed going past, it's not good. Help us out, people out there. Help us out.
You heard it here, folks. There's a smart man. He's speaking wisdom here. Don't ignore it. All right. So thanks again. I appreciate your time. Anybody listening, if you are listening right now, you already know where to find us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts, we are there. Also, if you have any questions, you want to give us some feedback here at APodAmongstMen, you can find us at APodAmongstMen on Instagram and APodAmongstMen@gmail.com for any longer form Dear Abby style questions. We're here. We're excited to hear from you. But thanks for listening, people, and until next week, we'll see you later. Peace.